On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 2007. We're going to be taking a look at Muse, and they're going to be performing Hysteria. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So before I get the guys up on screen, sometimes when I do feature British bands or artists, they get blocked on copyright, so I'm not entirely sure why that is. It's probably to do with the fact that certain copyrights only apply to certain countries, and people trying to watch it from other countries, it doesn't work. But anyway, if this is blocked on copyrights, then the link to this video is going to be in the description below, so you guys can click on the link there to watch it and then come back here for the analysis. I'll also pin it to the top of the comments as well. I'm just going to jump in here before we get into the solo. This is one of those songs that has such a great bass line in there, and you can argue that the bass riff that we hear is the main riff of the song. And with my history of teaching, there have been so many kids that have wanted to learn this bass line, but on the guitar. And I know that Matt Bellamy does join in a little bit later on, playing it on the guitar, but we have such stellar work throughout this whole song from Chris on bass, because it is relentless, and the amount of technique you need in order to nail this for the whole song, as you can see, just over 4 minutes of a really technical bass line, and keeping it so solid as well. Chris Wolstenholme, by the way, on bass here. We also have Dominic Howard on drums here, and you might be surprised to learn that it is just a three-piece. So this massive sound that they get live is achieved through tightness, having that foundation between Dominic and Chris, but then also Matt Bellamy, his voice, his vocal sound, but also his guitar sound, because they aren't a band that shy away from effects. They really do embrace them and use it to their advantage in order to get that really full sound live, but also on their records. And should I say, probably more likely CDs, because of the fact that they started releasing their albums late 90s and early 2000s as well. So it was around the time of CDs, but what you got on those CDs was quite a produced sound, and it depends which album you listen to, but some albums are really heavy, and then when they play it live, they really push the boundaries, turn it up to 11. So coming as a three-piece to the live stage, it can often be so difficult to get that produced sound of the album live. But if anything, Muse just up it for live, and they've got such a great sound. It is something that I do want to touch on, the vocal sound that we get here from Matt Bellamy. Not only his technique and throwing his voice up into that lighter falsetto sound, but it is so distinctive, and it is also so rare to hear a vocalist that has such a unique quality to their voice, so that when you hear them, you know it's them singing instantly. I know that the vocal sound is going to be tweaked from one song to the next, depending on the vocal and how Matt wants it to sound, but getting that same studio quality vocal live is so difficult, but Matt achieves that with the Avalon VT737, and especially with Hysteria, you can hear the amount of compression on that microphone before we even start. And if you don't know what compression is, it's effectively making the quieter sounds the same volume as the louder sounds. So it squashes the audio together, and this is what the Avalon VT737 will do. It's all going into this effects unit, and I don't want to get too complicated with it, but it has EQ on there, it has compression, and you can get into some real details. So ordinarily it would mean that when Matt is leaning into his chest voice, even belting in chest voice, which he does do on occasion, he does take that up pretty high, and then sometimes flips over into his falsetto. And when he does that, it means that by having compression on that microphone, the falsetto is going to sound louder and at the same level as chest voice. Otherwise, it would be the case that going into falsetto, it would sound a lot softer and a lot quieter than the chest voice sound. So that's what that compression on the microphone is achieving, and it's something that is standalone. You get such a unique sound to Matt's vocal because of what has been put on that microphone, but also the way that Matt can sing in chest voice, head voice, but also flip into that falsetto at will. We will get the guitar out in a second just to go through the guitar parts. Maybe we'll bust out the riff as well, but it isn't going to be an instructional video. The other thing to mention about the sound here, of course, on guitar, we've got distortion, and you can see the way that Matt at the beginning of the song is just trying to get a little bit of feedback from his amp, and he also scrapes down the string. I'll show you that as well. And the bass sound does have distortion on the bass. So these things that really will fatten the sound and fill in all of that frequency is what makes this such a full sound for a three-piece. So getting into the guitar parts briefly, starting out, Matt is scratching along his low E string and A string. It sounds like where beginning of the song where you can get this kind of effect. And then we'd be into the song. So you can do whatever you like with that. You can also do it the other way, and all I'm doing there is scratching with the side of my pick on the string. Obviously I'm doing it very slowly there to exaggerate it, but if you just keep it horizontal to the string, then you'll get that scratchy sound. You can also do it the other way as well. But anyway, when we get into the riff, we've got just octaves. So we've got our first finger on the 12th fret of our A string, playing our A, and then we've got the little finger or third finger. It doesn't really matter. I use little finger. That's what I find most comfortable. Playing the 14th fret of the G string, and you want to keep all the other strings quiet so we get this sound. And as you can see with that right hand, there's the full strumming action going on, so I am hitting all of the strings, but only hearing those two. So jumping into the next part, the riff, we've got this, and then we're going to shift up. And I have seen a lot of people on YouTube just playing the single note like that, and that's just going to be a semitone bend on the 16th fret of your G string, back down to the 14th fret. But I think most likely Matt's going to be playing that as well as an octave. Like that. So bending both the A string and the G, and then moving back down again, because with a three-piece especially, you want to fill in the sound as much as possible. So you might as well play that extra octave if you can. So getting into the next part, we've got... it's just going down to the 11th fret and then the 13th fret with the little finger. And we're always jumping up to this phrase. So we've got a lot of slides going on. The other thing is, don't be too worried about being messy with this, because we want to try and fill in as much of the sound as possible, so you can go for it on that right hand a bit with the rhythm. We then shift down to the 8th fret with the first finger, 10th fret with the little finger. Same phrase here, then back down to the 7th. And two bends here, like that. And then we start again. So putting that all together, we've got... along those lines, and then you just repeat that in the intro. So chord-wise, in the chorus, we've just got the C, and these are all power chords, so you can just play A string and the D string together. You can put in that extra octave if you want to with a little finger. We've got the C, G, D, A, C, G, D, down to the E, and then the bass starts up again with the riff, and the guitar plays the riff as well, I believe, later on in the song. So we'll have a little go through that as well. It's a little bit more involved, but it's a cool riff if we want to get it down with a pick. So diving into the riff, we've got this. those kind of lines. And breaking that down slowly, you might have noticed there, I do tend to put a little bit of palm mute on the sound, especially when there's a lot of distortion, just to make it a little bit clearer, rather than and having that sound. Makes it a little bit more concise with that palm mute and the picking. But anyway, getting into that, I'll slow it down so that you guys can hear what's going on. And like I said, it's not going to be an instructional video, but if I play it slowly enough, maybe you guys can get to grips with the notes that are going on. Like that, and then you just keep on repeating it. And if you want to, on YouTube, you can slow down the video, the speed at which it plays, so you could probably play that even slower and get a good idea of the notes. Just something to mention about your transition from the E string to the A string to the D string when we're playing this. That little phrase there, I've got down, down, down that I'm using. So I'm using economy picking there just to go across. Down, down, down. Because that way you'll be able to play all of the notes and transition from one to the next the most efficient way possible, because we're trying to get to the D string. If you do that with alternate picking, you're going to be going in the wrong direction to then get to the D string, and everything's got to be really organized when you're playing this riff. Also, you might hear a variation of the riff on the low E string, which sounds like this. And it's just going to be repeated like that over and over, and that can just be all alternate picked, absolutely fine. This is another thing about Muse playing live. Because they started in the early 90s, they have perfected their stagecraft and their whole live performance. They were one of those bands that just got out there as much as possible, gigged as much as possible, and also something that Chris did when he started playing bass was get lessons. When I mentioned about Chris having bass lessons when he joined the band, he was originally a drummer and then switched over to playing bass, and he would have only been 15 or 16 years of age, so they were still at school. It wasn't as if he was in his 20s and then had to learn how to play the bass, and you can certainly appreciate from this video and his technical ability that he did work very hard at playing the bass in order to have this kind of consistency live, but also the technical ability to pull this off live. I think the thing with Muse is that as a three-piece, they can have every single instrument up front because there are no weak links. And when there is a weak link in a three-piece, it will stick out. But here they are all of a top technical ability in order to keep that interest the whole time and be in the limelight as an instrumentalist if they want to independently. But then when you add all of those elements together and put Matt's vocal on top of that with the unique quality he has to it and his vocal delivery that's just stand alone with his technique going into falsetto, it just makes them unique as a whole band, but also having the ability to pull this kind of thing off live because it is so technical. Obviously it'll fly under the radar if you don't play bass or you don't play the guitar, but these guys are massively popular, especially here in the UK. They've sold well over 20 million albums and they've got 2 Grammys. They've won loads of awards here in the UK as well. Just to give you an idea, in 2003, their album that was called Absolution, when that was released, it went straight to #1 in the album charts, and it was the first of 5 albums that would go straight to that #1 spot. So massively popular, and a lot of that is to do with the songwriting, the melodic components of that songwriting, but also their live show. Being able to put on a show like this, turning it up to 11, and just really cranking it up. Also, putting on that showmanship, the entertainment side of it. You can see the way that Matt is just all over the stage and he gets everybody involved in the performances. So There's lots of stuff in here that is right down my street from a playing perspective. Also, the three-man sound of using technology as well. I do find it all very interesting. But thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!